1885, Dakota Territory. Charlotte Dalton's day started badly and got worse fast. The blizzard hit without warning, exactly when she was 3 miles from town checking on the Henderson family's new baby. Now the wind screamed across the prairie like a living thing, and she could barely see her horse's ears through the driving snow. Her father's medical bag bounced against her leg as she urged the mare faster. Get home. Just get home. That's when she saw the fence. The new barbed wire the railroad company strung last month, cutting right across the old trail. In summer, she'd have seen it a mile away. In this whiteout, she didn't notice until her horse shied violently sideways. Charlotte tumbled from the saddle, her burgundy wool dress catching on the vicious wire. She heard the fabric rip, felt cold air hit her legs as the wire held fast. She was stuck, tangled in barbed wire in the middle of a blizzard, with her petticoats exposed and her horse disappearing into the storm. Perfect. Just perfect. She twisted, trying to free herself, but the wire only caught more fabric. The wind bit through her exposed stockings. Her fingers, already numb, fumbled uselessly at the torn cloth. That's when she heard the horse. A rider appeared through the white curtain like a ghost, tall and broad-shouldered on a big gray gelding. He dismounted in one smooth motion, and Charlotte's mortification peaked as she realized what he must be seeing. Her dress hiked up past her knees, her white petticoats on full display, her carefully pinned hair coming loose in the wind. "Don't," she said sharply, trying for dignity she absolutely did not possess. "Don't look." The man raised both hands, though she caught the slight twitch at the corner of his mouth. "Wasn't planning on it, ma'am. But you're gonna freeze to death tangled in that fence, so maybe we can worry about propriety after we worry about survival." He was right. Curse him. Charlotte stopped struggling and forced herself to stillness as he approached. She kept her eyes fixed on the horizon, what little of it she could see, as his gloved hands worked at the wire. "Name's Owen Reed," he said, his voice low and steady. "I'm gonna have to cut this fabric. Hope that dress wasn't expensive." "It's fine," Charlotte managed through gritted teeth. "Just hurry." He produced a knife and worked carefully, freeing her inch by inch. His hands never touched her skin, she noticed. He was being as respectful as possible under utterly mortifying circumstances. When the last bit of fabric came free, he immediately turned his back. "Your horse ran that way," he said, pointing northeast. "Mine's steadier. We need to ride double back to town before this storm gets worse." "I'm Dr. Charlotte Dalton," she said, brushing snow from her torn skirts with as much dignity as she could gather. "And I need my medical bag. It's back by the fence." He turned then, and she got her first good look at him. Early 30s, weathered but handsome, with gray-blue eyes that studied her with unexpected intelligence. A drifter, by the look of him. Dusty trail clothes under that heavy duster, well-worn gear. The careful posture of a man ready to move on at any moment. But he walked back to the fence without question and retrieved her bag. "Doctor?" he said, handing it over. Something shifted in his expression. "You're Doc Dalton's daughter, the one who runs his practice now. You know my father? Met him once. Good man." Owen swung into his saddle and reached down for her. "We really need to go, Doc. This storm's about to get mean." Charlotte hesitated only a moment before taking his hand. He pulled her up behind him with easy strength, and she wrapped her arms around his waist as his horse lunged forward into the wind. Through the layers of his coat, she could feel solid muscle, the steady warmth of another human being in the frozen world. They rode in silence, bent against the storm. Charlotte pressed closer without thinking, seeking warmth. His back was broad and strong. His hands on the reins were steady and sure. And despite the howling wind and driving snow, she felt something unexpected. Safe. By the time they reached the edge of town 20 minutes later, Charlotte could barely feel her fingers or toes. Owen guided his horse straight to her father's house on the main street, the one with the sign that read Medi-Cal Practice. He dismounted first, then lifted her down with careful hands. "Thank you," Charlotte said, meaning it. "You saved my life. Just happened to be riding through." He tipped his hat, snow sliding from the brim. "Glad I could help, Doc." He started to turn away, but Charlotte caught his sleeve. "Wait. You'll freeze if you try to ride anywhere in this. There's a room above my office. You can stay until the storm passes." Owen looked at her, something unreadable in those gray-blue eyes. For a moment she thought he'd refuse. Then he nodded once. "Appreciated." Inside, Charlotte lit lamps with shaking hands, while Owen stabled his horse in the small barn behind the house. The medical office occupied the front room, examination table and cabinets lined with bottles and instruments. The living quarters were modest, but clean. Her father had died 6 months ago, leaving her the practice and 1,000 memories. Owen returned stamping snow from his boots. "Storm's getting worse. We're not going to see the other side of the street by dark." "Then we're stuck here together," Charlotte said, trying to keep her voice steady. Alone with a strange man, a drifter, someone she knew nothing about except that he'd been decent when he didn't have to be. She busied herself building up the fire, grateful for something to do with her hands. Owen stood near the door, clearly uncertain whether to stay or go. "The room upstairs has a bed," Charlotte said without looking at him. "There's blankets. I'll sleep down here by the fire." "No." His voice was firm. "You take your bed. I've slept in worse places than in front of a warm fire." They looked at each other across the small room. The wind howled outside, rattling the windows. Charlotte's torn dress dripped melted snow onto the floor. Owen's coat was crusted with ice. And despite everything, despite the impropriety and the strangeness and the storm, Charlotte felt something warm unfurl in her chest. Trust. The beginning of it, anyway. "I'll make coffee," she said. "And then you're going to tell me what brings a drifter to Dakota Territory in the middle of winter." Owen's mouth quirked. "That a medical question, Doc?" "Just curious." Charlotte moved to the stove, grateful for the return of feeling to her fingers. "You saved my life. I'd like to know who you are." "Fair enough." Owen shrugged out of his duster and hung it by the fire. Without the heavy coat, she could see his lean build, the easy way he moved. But the story's not particularly interesting. Just a man running from his past, looking for somewhere to disappear. "Well," Charlotte said, measuring coffee grounds with steady hands, "you picked the right territory for that. Dakota's full of people starting over. That why you're here?" She met his eyes. "I was born here. This is home. But yes, I'm starting over too. My father died 6 months ago. Left me his practice in a town that's not entirely sure a woman can do a doctor's job. Can you? Better than he could in some ways." Charlotte poured water into the pot. "I studied back east for 2 years. learned techniques he never heard of. But half the town still calls me Doc Dalton's daughter, not Dr. Dalton. Their loss. Owen settled into a chair by the fire, stretching his long legs toward the warmth. Any fool can see you know what you're doing. Something about the casual way he said it, the simple acceptance, made Charlotte's throat tight. She turned back to the stove, blinking hard. Outside, the blizzard screamed and raged. Inside, the fire crackled warmly. And two strangers, both running from something, both trying to build new lives from broken pieces, sat in companionable silence as the coffee brewed. Neither of them knew it yet, but the storm outside was nothing compared to the one about to hit. Because Judge Thaddeus Kincaid didn't like people who got in the railroad's way. And Charlotte Dalton, with her medical practice and her stubborn refusal to sell her property, was very much in the way. The storm lasted 3 days. 3 days of howling wind and snow piling so high, it buried the bottom half of Charlotte's windows. 3 days of being trapped inside with Owen Reed, a man she barely knew, but was learning to understand. He was handy, she discovered. Fixed the door that always stuck, repaired her father's old desk, kept the fire going, and the woodbox full even though getting to the woodpile meant wading through chest-deep drifts. He was also haunted. Charlotte saw it in the way he stared into the fire late at night, in the nightmares that woke him gasping. On the second night, when he jerked awake with a strangled sound, she came downstairs without thinking. Owen. She knelt beside him, her nightgown and shawl pulled tight. You're safe. It's just a dream. His eyes were wild for a moment, unseeing. Then recognition dawned. He scrubbed a hand over his face. Sorry, didn't mean to wake you. What do you dream about? The war. He said it simply, like confession. I was cavalry, saw things, did things. Can't seem to leave them behind no matter how far I ride. Charlotte understood about ghosts. She had her own. My father died of a fever I couldn't break, she said quietly. I tried everything I knew. Nothing worked. Some nights I still hear him calling for help I couldn't give. Owen looked at her then, really looked. And something passed between them in the firelight. Recognition. Understanding. Two wounded people acknowledging each other's scars. You did everything you could, Owen said. So did you. They sat together in silence after that, watching the fire burn low. When Charlotte finally went back upstairs, she felt lighter somehow. Less alone. On the third day, the wind finally died. Charlotte opened the front door to a world transformed. Snow gleamed white and pristine as far as she could see. The sun on it was almost blinding, and in the middle of the street, she could just make out figures moving. The town digging itself out. I should check on my patients, she said, though part of her didn't want the storm to end. Didn't want this strange, warm bubble of safety to burst. Owen came to stand beside her, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. I'll help dig out paths. Least I can do for the hospitality. But before either of them could move, a figure appeared through the snow. Marshal Tom Brennan, looking grim. Doc Dalton. Got a minute? Something in his tone made Charlotte's stomach tighten. What's wrong? Judge Kincaid's calling an emergency town meeting. Tonight. Says the railroad's making a final offer for properties along the proposed route. Marshal Brennan shifted uncomfortably. Your property's one of them. I've already refused to sell, I know. But the judge is pushing hard. Says the railroad brings progress, jobs, future. And he's got half the town believing him because he controls most of the businesses around here. The marshal's expression was troubled. Just thought you should know. Things might get ugly. After he left, Charlotte stood staring out at the snow. Her father had built this practice 30 years ago. She learned medicine in this very room. Every instrument, every bottle, every piece of equipment held memories. You don't have to sell, Owen said quietly behind her. The judge owns the bank, the general store, half the buildings on this street. If he decides to make my life difficult, he can. Charlotte turned to face him. But this is my home. I won't give it up without a fight. Then you won't fight alone. The words were simple, but the look in Owen's eyes was not. Charlotte felt her breath catch. In 3 days, this stranger had become something more. Someone she trusted. Someone who made her feel less alone in the world. Why? She asked. You're a drifter. You said yourself you're just passing through. This isn't your fight. Owen stepped closer. Close enough that she could see the flecks of blue in his gray eyes. Maybe I'm tired of drifting. Maybe I'm looking for a reason to stay. The air between them felt charged, electric. Charlotte's heart hammered. She should step back, should maintain distance, should remember that she barely knew this man. But she didn't step back. The meeting's at 7, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. At the church. Then we better get ready. The church was packed when they arrived that evening. Every chair filled, people standing along the walls. Charlotte felt the weight of dozens of eyes as she walked up the center aisle with Owen at her side. Whispers followed them. The spinster doctor and the strange drifter. Improper. Scandalous. Charlotte lifted her chin and kept walking. Judge Thaddeus Kincaid stood at the front, a big man in expensive clothes. His round face jovial, but his eyes cold and calculating. Beside him stood 2 railroad representatives in their city suits. Ah, Dr. Dalton. The judge's smile didn't reach his eyes. So glad you could join us. We were just discussing the railroad's generous offer for your property. I'm not interested in selling, Judge, as I've told you 3 times already. Now, let's not be hasty. The railroad is offering fair market value, plus a bonus. You could relocate your practice anywhere. Build a fine new building. His voice carried across the silent church. Think of the good you could do with that money. I can do plenty of good, right where I am. The judge's expression hardened slightly. The railroad is progress, Doctor. It will bring jobs, commerce, growth. One woman's sentimental attachment to a building can't be allowed to stand in the way of an entire community's future. Funny how that progress requires destroying what's already here, Owen said, his voice carrying quiet authority. And how the judge stands to profit handsomely from the railroad's arrival, given that he owns half the commercial property in town. The room erupted in whispers. Judge Kincaid's face flushed. And who are you exactly? A drifter with no stake in this community, from what I hear. A man who recognizes a land grab when he sees one. Owen's gaze was steady. And a man who knows the law. Eminent domain requires proving public necessity and paying fair compensation. You can't just force people to sell because it's convenient for your business partners. I'm a judge, son. I know the law quite well. Then you know Dr. Dalton has every right to refuse your offer. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut. Judge Kincaid's eyes narrowed. You're new here, so let me explain how things work in this town. I control the bank, the store, the jobs. Cross me, and life gets very difficult very fast. His gaze shifted to Charlotte. I'd hate to see your patients suddenly unable to pay their bills, doctor, or find themselves buying their supplies from a merchant who refuses to extend you credit. It was a threat, clear and unmistakable. Charlotte felt anger burn hot in her chest. Are you threatening me, Judge? I'm explaining reality. He turned back to the crowd. Now, I'm calling for a vote. All in favor of supporting the railroad's expansion and encouraging Dr. Dalton to accept their generous offer? Hands rose. Too many hands. People Charlotte had treated, had saved. Fear made them complicit, she realized. Fear of losing jobs, losing income, crossing the judge. Motion carries. Judge Kincaid smiled. Dr. Dalton, you have 1 week to reconsider. After that, I'll be forced to take legal action to acquire your property for the good of the community. Outside the church, Charlotte stood in the cold night air, shaking with fury. He can't do this. He can't force me to sell. He can if nobody stops him. Owen settled his hat on his head. Question is, how far are you willing to go? Charlotte looked at him. This man who'd appeared out of a blizzard and somehow become her ally, her protector. Maybe something more, though she barely dared to think it. As far as it takes, she said. This is my home, my life's work. I won't give it up. Then we fight. Owen's eyes glinted in the lamplight. But fighting a corrupt judge isn't like treating patients, Doc. It's gonna get ugly. I'm tougher than I look. I'm counting on it. They walked back through the snow-packed streets in silence. When they reached her door, Charlotte hesitated. You don't have to stay. This is my battle. Already told you. I'm done drifting. Owen looked down at her, and something in his expression made her heart skip. Unless you want me to go. No. The word came out before she could think. No. I don't want you to go. Good. His gloved hand came up to touch her cheek, the gesture so gentle it made her breath catch. Because I don't want to leave. The moment stretched between them, full of possibility and promise. Then Owen stepped back, tipping his hat. Get some sleep, Doc. Tomorrow we start figuring out how to beat Judge Kincaid at his own game. Inside, Charlotte stood by the fire for a long time, her cheeks still warm where he'd touched her. 3 days ago, she'd been alone, struggling to keep her practice and her dignity. Now, she had an ally, a partner in this fight. And maybe, just maybe, the beginning of something she'd thought lost forever. Hope. The next morning, Charlotte woke to the smell of coffee and frying bacon. She came downstairs to find Owen at her stove, somehow managing to cook breakfast in her small kitchen without making a mess. You cook? She couldn't hide her surprise. Trail life teaches you quick. He poured her coffee, black and strong the way she liked it. Figured you could use a good meal before we start planning our defense. They ate at her small table, and Charlotte found herself studying him in the morning light. He was handsome, she admitted. Not in a polished, citified way, but with the weathered strength of a man who'd survived hard years. And his hands, scarred and calloused, were surprisingly gentle when he handed her a plate. Tell me about the judge, Owen said. Everything you know. Thaddeus Kincaid came here 10 years ago. Made his fortune buying up failing businesses during the Panic of '73. Now he owns the bank, the general store, the hotel, and half a dozen other buildings. Most people in town owe him money or depend on his businesses for work. Charlotte wrapped her hands around her coffee cup. He's smart, ruthless, and he always wins. Everyone loses eventually. Not him. Not yet. Charlotte met Owen's eyes. What's your plan? Information. Owen leaned back in his chair. Men like Kincaid always have secrets. Things they don't want known. We find those secrets. We find leverage. You sound like you've done this before. I've fought men who abuse power. Learned a few things. His expression darkened. After the war, I worked for a cattle baron who thought money meant he could do whatever he wanted. Took 3 years, but we brought him down, sent him to prison. Is that why you're running? Because you made enemies? Owen was quiet for a long moment. I'm running because I killed a man. In a fair fight, witnessed and legal. But his family had connections. Put a price on my head. So I've been moving ever since, staying ahead of bounty hunters and hired guns. Charlotte should have been afraid, should have ordered him to leave. Instead, she reached across the table and took his hand. Thank you for telling me. You deserve to know. If this gets dangerous, if men come looking for me, I'll leave. I won't bring trouble to your door. Owen. She squeezed his hand. You're already part of this trouble. And I'm not afraid. His fingers tightened on hers, and the look in his eyes made her stomach flutter. Then he pulled away, clearing his throat. Right. So, information gathering. I'll visit the saloon, buy some drinks, listen to gossip. You talk to your patients. Someone knows something about Kincaid. Always do. They spent the day working their separate tasks. Charlotte made house calls, checking on patients and carefully asking questions. Owen disappeared into the saloon and came back hours later, smelling of whiskey and tobacco. That evening, they compared notes by the fire. Judge Kincaid has a brother, Charlotte said. Lives back east. Nobody ever talks about him. I found that odd. The barkeep mentioned the judge getting telegrams that make him nervous, Owen added. Always from someplace called Harrisburg. That mean anything? Pennsylvania. Capital city. Charlotte frowned, thinking. Why would a territorial judge be getting concerning telegrams from Pennsylvania? Only one way to find out. Telegraph office opens at 6 tomorrow. I'll send some inquiries to a friend back east. Former marshal who knows how to dig up information. They worked late into the night, going through her father's old records, looking for anything that might help. Somewhere past midnight, Charlotte felt her eyes growing heavy. She didn't realize she'd dozed off until she woke with her head on Owen's shoulder. Sorry, she murmured, starting to pull away. His arm came around her, keeping her close. Don't be. You're exhausted. Charlotte should have moved, should have maintained proper distance. Instead, she let herself lean into his warmth, his strength. His hand stroked her hair once, gently, and she felt something inside her chest crack open. Owen, she whispered. I'm scared. I know. Not just of the judge. Of this. Of feeling something for you when I barely know you. When you might leave tomorrow. His arm tightened. I'm not leaving tomorrow. But someday. Maybe. His voice was rough. Or maybe I'm tired of running. Maybe I found something worth staying for. Charlotte lifted her head to look at him. His eyes were intense, full of things unspoken. Slowly, giving her time to pull away, he leaned down. His lips brushed hers, soft and questioning. The kiss started gentle, but deepened fast. Charlotte's hand came up to cup his stubbled jaw as his fingers slid into her hair. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Owen pressed his forehead to hers. "That answer your question?" he asked. "It raises about a dozen more." He laughed, low and warm. "Fair enough. But right now, you need sleep. Real sleep. In a bed. Go on. I'll keep the fire going." Charlotte stood reluctantly, not wanting to leave the warmth of his arms. At the stairs, she turned back. "Owen, I'm glad you rode through that blizzard." "So am I, Doc. So am I." 2 days later, Owen's telegraph response arrived. Charlotte was treating old man Henderson's rheumatism when Owen burst through the door, waving a paper. "Got it. Got what we need." As soon as her patient left, Charlotte rounded on him. "What did you find?" "Judge Thaddeus Kincaid isn't his real name. He's Thomas Kincaid. Wanted in Pennsylvania for embezzlement and fraud. Changed his name, bought forged credentials, and disappeared west 15 years ago." Owen spread the telegram on her desk. "His brother's been covering for him, but the Philadelphia authorities are still looking." Charlotte stared at the paper, her heart pounding. This could destroy him, or get us killed if we're not careful. Owen's expression was serious. Men with this much to lose are dangerous. We need to be smart about how we use this. Before Charlotte could respond, the door burst open. Marshal Brennan stumbled in, blood streaming from a gash on his forehead. "Doc, I need help." He collapsed into a chair. "And I need to warn you. Judge just put out the word. Anyone who treats you or does business with you answers to him. He's squeezing you out." Charlotte grabbed her medical bag, her hand steady despite her racing heart. "How did you get hurt?" "Tried to stand up to him. Said what he's doing isn't legal. He had his men rough me up. Told me to mind my own business." The marshal winced as Charlotte cleaned his wound. "I'm sorry, Doc. I should have done more. You did plenty by warning us." Owen stood by the window, watching the street. "How many men does he have?" 4 regular enforcers, plus whoever he can pay. And the railroads bringing their own security. Could be a dozen men by week's end. Charlotte's hands trembled slightly as she stitched the marshal's wound. A dozen men. Against what? Her and Owen? It seemed impossible. "We have leverage now," Owen said quietly. "Information that could send Kincaid to prison. Then use it." Marshal Brennan grabbed Owen's arm. "Before someone gets killed." That night, Charlotte couldn't sleep. She paced her small living quarters, jumping at every sound outside. Owen sat by the fire, cleaning his gun with methodical precision. "You should eat something," he said without looking up. "I'm not hungry. You need to keep your strength up." "Owen." She stopped pacing, facing him. "What if we can't win? What if Kincaid is too powerful?" He set the gun aside and stood, crossing to her. His hands settled on her shoulders, warm and steady. "Then we go down fighting. But I don't think it'll come to that. Men like Kincaid are bullies. Confront them with the truth, and they fold. Or they get violent. That's why I'm here. His thumb brushed her cheek. I won't let him hurt you, Charlotte. I promise. The use of her first name made her breath catch. She looked up at him, this man who'd become so important so fast. I believe you. Good. He pulled her close, and she let herself lean into his chest, listening to his steady heartbeat. We're gonna get through this. Together. The next morning, Owen rode out before dawn. Charlotte spent the day treating the few patients brave enough to defy the judge's edict. Mrs. Chen, the Chinese laundress, came with a burned hand. Young Tommy Wilson arrived with a broken arm from falling out of a tree. My pa said not to come, Tommy admitted as Charlotte set his arm. But Ma said anyone who'd turn away from Doc Dalton in her hour of need deserves whatever sickness comes their way. Charlotte smiled despite her worry. Tell your mother thank you. She also said to tell you half the women in town are on your side. They're just scared to say so out loud. It was something. Not much, but something. Owen returned at dusk, looking grim. Talked to the territorial governor's representative. He's willing to investigate Kincaid if we can provide proof. But he needs more than a telegram. He needs documentation, witnesses, evidence. How do we get that? We break into Kincaid's office and find his real records. Charlotte stared at him. That's insane. And illegal. So is everything Kincaid's doing. Owen's jaw was set. I know it's risky, but it might be our only shot. When? Tonight. During the town dance. Everyone will be at the hotel, including Kincaid. His office will be empty. Charlotte's mind raced through all the ways this could go wrong. They could get caught, get arrested, get shot. But if they did nothing, she'd lose everything anyway. I'm coming with you, she said. Charlotte, it's my fight. I'm coming. They waited until the music from the hotel ballroom was loud enough to cover any noise. Then, they slipped through the dark streets to the judge's office, a small building next to the bank. Owen made quick work of the lock. Inside, Charlotte held the lantern while he rifled through desk drawers and filing cabinets. Here. Owen pulled out a leather-bound ledger. Jesus. He's been skimming from every business he controls. Thousands of dollars. Charlotte found another book. And here's correspondence with his brother. Thomas, I send money monthly to keep your silence. If the authorities ever trace me here, you'll lose everything too. So keep your mouth shut and cash the checks. That's blackmail on top of everything else. Owen gathered papers, stuffing them into a satchel. This is enough. The governor will have to act on. The door slammed open. Judge Kincaid stood silhouetted in the doorway, two armed men behind him. Well, breaking and entering. Theft. I could have you both hanged for this. Charlotte's heart stopped. Owen moved in front of her, his hand on his gun. Don't even think about it, cowboy. Kincaid smiled coldly. My men are faster. And even if you manage to shoot me, you'll both be dead before you take 3 steps. Shoot us, and everyone will know why, Owen said calmly. These documents prove you're a fraud and a thief. They get to the territorial governor, you're finished. Those documents will burn. along with any witnesses. Kincaid stepped closer. Did you really think I'd let you destroy everything I've built? I've killed men for less. Charlotte felt Owen tense. The air crackled with violence about to explode. Then, she heard it. Footsteps. Lots of them. Marshal Brennan appeared in the doorway, flanked by a dozen townspeople. Mrs. Chen, Tommy Wilson's mother. The barkeeper. The blacksmith. Others Charlotte recognized. Stand down, Judge. The marshal's voice was hard. It's over. You have no authority here. I control this town. Not anymore. Mrs. Henderson pushed forward, her elderly frame shaking but her voice firm. We heard everything. Your confession. Your threats. Half the town's outside right now, listening. Kincaid's face went purple. You'll all regret this. I'll destroy every one of you. With what? Owen held up the ledger. These books show you've been stealing from everyone in town for years. You're done, Kincaid. Or should I say Thomas Kincaid, fugitive from Pennsylvania. The fight went out of the judge, all at once. His shoulders slumped. His men stepped away, unwilling to go down with him. Marshal Brennan moved forward with rope. Judge Thaddeus Kincaid, I'm arresting you for fraud, embezzlement, extortion, and threatening murder. You'll be held until the territorial authorities arrive. As the marshal led Kincaid away, Charlotte felt her knees go weak. Owen caught her, pulling her close. It's over, he murmured into her hair. You're safe. Charlotte clung to him, shaking with reaction. They'd won. Actually won. The townspeople crowded around, apologizing, thanking her, promising their support. Mrs. Henderson patted Charlotte's hand. Your father would be proud, dear. You stood up for what's right, just like he taught you. It was another hour before they could escape back to Charlotte's house. Inside, with the door locked and the fire burning, Charlotte finally let herself fall apart. She sank into a chair and burst into tears. Owen knelt beside her, pulling her into his arms. Hey. Hey. It's all right. You're safe now. I was so scared, she sobbed into his shoulder. I thought he was going to kill us. But he didn't. You were so brave, Charlotte. So damn brave. She pulled back to look at him, this man who'd stood between her and danger, without hesitation. We were brave. Together. Together. He wiped her tears with gentle thumbs. I like the sound of that. Charlotte's breath caught. The fear and adrenaline were fading, replaced by something warmer, deeper. Owen. He kissed her. Not gentle this time, but desperate, fierce, full of everything they'd been holding back. Charlotte kissed him back with the same intensity, her fingers tangling in his hair. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Owen pressed his forehead to hers. I love you, he said roughly. I know it's too soon. I know you barely know me. But I love you, Charlotte Dalton, and I'm not going anywhere. Good. She cupped his face, her heart so full it hurt. Because I love you too. And I want you to stay. Forever? These ignore the sows between Hiriquatzing for self-times and luck around her. Like Monsoni is stressed and the tours Renata, who said. This place, where a lost allows white, in the towel and tired. Cone let Drandinga didn't shout at that plane. But also mutters then, call the calling the plant or suppose the tours the stression for the Rowland Sichard Strangem. Forever. He kissed her again, softer this time, full of promise. When he lifted her in his arms and carried her toward the stairs, Charlotte didn't protest. This was right. This was real. This was the man she chose. At the top of the stairs, Owen paused. You sure? I've never been more sure of anything. He carried her into her bedroom and kicked the door closed behind them. Outside, snow began to fall again, soft and gentle. Inside, two people who'd found each other in a blizzard found something even more powerful. Love. Real, deep, lasting love. The morning sun streamed through Charlotte's window, painting golden stripes across the bed. She woke wrapped in Owen's arms, his chest rising and falling beneath her cheek. She'd never known such peace, such absolute contentment. When he stirred and pulled her closer, murmuring her name, she smiled against his skin. This was home. Not the building, not the practice, but this. Him. Them together. Morning, Owen rumbled, his voice still rough with sleep. Morning. Charlotte tilted her head up to kiss his jaw. Sleep well? Better than I have in years. He stroked her hair, his touch infinitely gentle. No nightmares. First time in I don't know how long. Maybe you finally found peace. Maybe I finally found you. He rolled to face her properly, his gray-blue eyes warm in the morning light. I meant what I said last night. I'm staying. If you'll have me, I'll have you. Charlotte traced his features with her fingertips, memorizing every detail. But Owen, you need to know. Being with me won't be easy. I'm a doctor in a town that's not entirely comfortable with women in medicine. I work long hours. I get called away at all hours for emergencies. I know who you are, Charlotte, and I love exactly that woman. He caught her hand, kissing her palm. I'll support your work, help where I can. And maybe, if you're willing, I could stay on as your assistant. Learn some doctoring. God knows this territory needs more medical help. The offer surprised her. You'd want that? I'd want anything that keeps me by your side. They spent the morning in comfortable domesticity. Owen made breakfast while Charlotte dressed. They ate together, talking about the future with the ease of people who decided to build one together. A knock on the door interrupted their planning. Marshal Brennan stood outside, looking pleased. Morning, Doc. Owen. Thought you'd want to know. The territorial governor's representative arrived this morning, took one look at those ledgers and arrested Kincaid officially. He'll be transported to Pennsylvania to face charges there too. What about the railroad? Charlotte asked. They pulled out. Turns out the whole scheme was Kincaid's idea. He stood to make a fortune from the land purchases. Railroad companies' lawyers say they had no knowledge of the corruption. The marshal tipped his hat. Your property's safe, Doc, and the town council wants to offer official apologies for not standing up to Kincaid sooner. After he left, Charlotte leaned against Owen, relief washing through her. It's really over. It's really over. He wrapped his arms around her waist from behind, resting his chin on her head. Now we can focus on building that future we talked about. Over the next few days, life settled into a new rhythm. Owen proved surprisingly good at assisting with medical work. His steady hands and calm demeanor helped frightened patients relax. Charlotte taught him to clean wounds, set simple fractures, mix medicines. They worked side by side during the days. At night, they sat by the fire making plans. A wedding, small and simple. Expansion of the practice to serve more of the territory. Maybe, someday, children. The town, grateful and embarrassed in equal measure, welcomed them. Mrs. Henderson organized a collection to buy Charlotte new medical equipment. The blacksmith offered to build whatever she needed. Even the Chinese community, long marginalized, came forward with herbs and traditional remedies that Charlotte eagerly studied. "You were right," Owen said one evening as they reviewed the week's accounts. "This town needed someone to stand up for what's right. Now they're remembering how to be a community again." "We stood up together," Charlotte corrected. "I couldn't have done it without you. Partners." He reached across the table to take her hand. "In everything." "In everything," Charlotte agreed. A week after Kincaid's arrest, Owen left for 2 days. He wouldn't say where he was going, just kissed Charlotte and promised to return. She tried not to worry, but the old fears crept in. What if he didn't come back? What if drifting was too strong a habit to break? But he did come back, riding into town at sunset on the second day. Charlotte ran out to meet him, not caring who saw. "Where were you?" She grabbed his coat. "I was worried sick." Owen dismounted and pulled a small box from his saddlebag. "Went to Rapid City. Needed to get something." He opened the box to reveal a simple gold ring. "It's not fancy, but it's real gold, and I bought it honest. Charlotte Dalton, will you marry me properly, with a ring and a preacher and the whole town watching?" Charlotte's eyes filled with tears. "Yes. Yes. Of course, yes." He slipped the ring on her finger, then kissed her in the middle of the street while half the town watched and cheered. Charlotte didn't care. Let them see. Let them know. This man was hers, and she was his, and nothing would ever change that. They married 2 weeks later in the same church where the town meeting had been held. The transformation was remarkable. Where before there had been fear and anger, now there was joy. Mrs. Henderson and Mrs. Chen decorated with winter evergreens and white ribbons. The whole town turned out, dressed in their best. Charlotte wore a simple ivory dress that had been her mother's, altered to fit. Owen wore a new suit, looking uncomfortable, but handsome. When the preacher asked if they took each other, their voices rang out clear and strong. "I do." The kiss that sealed their vows was sweet and full of promise. When they turned to face the congregation as husband and wife, the applause was thunderous. The celebration lasted well into the evening. There was food and music and dancing. Charlotte danced with Owen, with the marshal, with old Mr. Henderson. Every face she saw was smiling. This was what community was supposed to be. People taking care of each other, celebrating together, standing together. As the night wound down, Owen pulled Charlotte aside. "Ready to go home, Mrs. Reed?" "Mrs. Reed." Charlotte tested the name, liking how it sounded. "I like that. But yes, I'm ready." They walked through the quiet streets hand in hand, snow crunching under their feet. Above them, stars blazed in the clear winter sky. At her door, their door now, Owen lifted her in his arms. "Tradition," he said with a grin, carrying her across the threshold. Inside, the fire was already burning, courtesy of Mrs. Chen, who'd promised to prepare the house. Charlotte looked around the familiar space that felt entirely new. This was their home now, their practice, their life together. "Happy?" Owen asked, setting her down gently. "Happier than I ever thought possible." Charlotte wrapped her arms around his neck. "You saved my life, you know. Not just from the blizzard or from Kincaid. You saved me from being alone, from giving up on love. You saved mine too." He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. "I was just drifting, waiting to die or disappear. You gave me a reason to live, a reason to stay, a home. We gave each other a home." They stood together in the firelight, two people who'd found each other against all odds. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows. But inside, wrapped in each other's arms, they were warm and safe, and exactly where they belonged. The practice thrived in the months that followed. Word spread about the woman doctor and her cowboy assistant who'd stood up to corruption. Patients came from 50 miles away seeking treatment. Owen proved to have a gift for medicine, his gentle manner and quick learning making him invaluable. They worked together seamlessly, anticipating each other's needs, supporting each other through long days and difficult cases. At night, they returned to the home they'd built together, exhausted but content. Spring arrived, melting the snow and bringing new growth. Charlotte discovered she was pregnant in early April. She told Owen over breakfast, watching his face transform from surprise to wonder to pure joy. "A baby?" He came around the table and knelt beside her chair, his hand gentle on her still flat stomach. "We're having a baby?" "We are." Charlotte covered his hand with hers. "Are you happy?" "Happy doesn't cover it." He looked up at her with tears in his eyes. "Terrified, thrilled, grateful. Everything. Me too." They told the town at church that Sunday. The celebration rivaled their wedding. Mrs. Henderson immediately started knitting blankets. Mrs. Chen promised traditional herbs for healthy pregnancy. The whole community embraced the news with the joy of people invested in the future. As summer arrived and Charlotte's belly grew, Owen became increasingly protective. He insisted on handling the heavier work, on accompanying her on house calls, on making sure she rested enough. "I'm pregnant, not fragile," Charlotte protested one evening when he tried to carry her upstairs. "Indulge me." Owen's hand rested on her rounded stomach. "I never thought I'd have this. A wife, a home, a child on the way. Let me take care of you." How could she argue with that? Charlotte let him fuss, knowing it came from love. The baby arrived on a cool September evening, just as the leaves began to turn. Charlotte's labor was long and difficult, but Owen never left her side. He held her hand, wiped her forehead, breathed with her through the contractions. When their daughter finally arrived, red-faced and screaming, Charlotte wept with relief and joy. Owen cut the cord with shaking hands, then held their baby with such tenderness it made Charlotte's heart ache. "She's perfect," he whispered, tears streaming down his face. "Charlotte, she's perfect. What should we name her?" Owen looked up, and in his eyes Charlotte saw everything they'd been through together. The blizzard that brought them together. The danger they'd faced. The love they'd found. "Hope," he said. "Her name is Hope." Charlotte nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. Hope. The thing she'd thought, lost forever, until Owen rode into her life. The thing they'd built together, brick by brick, through love and courage and unwavering faith in each other. "Hope Reed," she agreed. "It's perfect." The town threw another celebration when Charlotte was recovered enough to receive visitors. They came bearing gifts and good wishes. Baby clothes and blankets and toys. Promises of help and support. The community they'd helped rebuild now surrounded them with love. Mrs. Henderson held baby Hope and smiled. "Your parents would be so proud, Charlotte. Both of them. You've built something beautiful here. Not just a medical practice, but a real home. A family." That night, after all the visitors had left, Charlotte sat in the rocking chair Owen had built, nursing Hope while he banked the fire. The house was quiet, peaceful. Outside, autumn wind whispered through the trees. Inside, their small family was safe and warm and together. Owen came to sit beside her, his hand gentle on Hope's downy head. "This is everything I never knew I wanted," he said quietly. "Thank you for giving me this life." "We gave it to each other." Charlotte leaned her head on his shoulder. "I love you, Owen Reed." "I love you too, Charlotte Reed. More than words can say." They sat together in the firelight, watching their daughter sleep. Two people who'd been lost and alone had found each other in a blizzard. Together they'd fought corruption, built a practice, created a home, and now they had this perfect tiny person. The embodiment of everything they'd overcome and everything they'd become. Outside, the first snow of the season began to fall. Charlotte watched the flakes drift past the window and smiled, remembering another snowstorm, another night when her life had changed forever. She'd thought she was alone then, thought her chance at happiness was over. She'd been so wrong. Sometimes, she thought, the greatest gifts arrive in the worst storms. Sometimes love finds you when you've stopped looking. Sometimes a stranger becomes the person you can't imagine living without. And sometimes, Charlotte knew as she held her daughter and felt her husband's arm around her shoulders. Sometimes, broken people find each other and build something whole. Something beautiful. Something that feels, at last, like home. Winter settled over Dakota Territory like a comfortable blanket. The practice continued to grow, and Owen had become skilled enough to handle many cases on his own, while Charlotte managed the more complicated treatments and surgeries. One particularly cold evening in late November, Charlotte stood at the window, watching snow fall, while Owen played with Hope on the floor. At 6 months old, their daughter was all smiles and reaching hands, fascinated by everything. "What are you thinking about?" Owen asked, glancing up at her. "How different my life is from a year ago." Charlotte turned to look at them, her heart full. "Last winter I was alone, afraid I'd lose everything. Now I have you. Hope. A thriving practice. A community that supports us." Owen stood, settling Hope on his hip, and came to join Charlotte at the window. His free arm slipped around her waist. Last winter I was running, convinced I'd never have a home, never have a family. Now I wake up every morning next to you and think I must be dreaming. Hope reached for Charlotte, babbling happily. Charlotte took her daughter, kissing her soft baby hair, then looked up at Owen. No dream. This is real. This is our life. Best life I could imagine. Owen kissed Charlotte's forehead. You know what today is? Tuesday? She lit ignore their supposed back to me, let's say for self-times and not go round her. Like key months leaves, and Tories were another who said, their rest place where the lost allows white. Ow, locked my end. Cohen lit preending a din to shout of that lane. I also minded dumb, I call that coin to placard or expose the Tories. It's exactly 1 year since the blizzard. 1 year since I found you stuck in that fence. His eyes sparkled with mischief. Most embarrassing moment of your life, probably. Charlotte laughed. Definitely, top 5. But I'm glad it happened. Otherwise, you might have ridden right past town. Not a chance. Something would have brought me here. Maybe I was always meant to find you. You believe in fate? I believe in us. Owen pulled both of them close. His family. His home. Everything else is just details. They stood together watching the snow. Hope nestled between them. The fire crackled. The wind sang. And in that small house in Dakota Territory, 3 people who belonged together were exactly where they were meant to be. Outside, the blizzard raged. Inside, there was only warmth and love and the quiet joy of home. As winter deepened, their partnership in both life and work only grew stronger. Charlotte taught Owen more advanced medical techniques, surprised and pleased by how quickly he learned. He had steady hands and a calm demeanor that patients responded to. You're a natural healer, she told him one evening after he'd successfully treated a difficult case. You could take the medical exams, become a licensed doctor yourself. Owen looked surprised. You think I could? I know you could. We could be the first husband-wife medical practice in the territory. The idea took root. Owen began studying Charlotte's medical texts at night, asking questions, practicing techniques. Charlotte watched him grow more confident, more skilled, and felt pride swell in her chest. This man who'd been drifting and lost had found his calling. One particularly memorable morning, a young woman arrived in labor, her husband frantic. Charlotte was in the middle of surgery on a ranch hand's badly infected leg. She made a split-second decision. Owen, you take the birth. I'll finish here. Owen's eyes widened. Charlotte, you've assisted with 5 births. You know what to do. I trust you. She saw him square his shoulders, take a breath, and nod. All right. I've got this. 2 hours later, both patients were resting comfortably. The ranch hand's leg was saved. The young woman had delivered a healthy baby boy. Owen emerged from the birthing room looking exhausted and exhilarated. I did it, he said, something like wonder in his voice. Charlotte, I actually delivered a baby on my own. She kissed him, not caring that they were in the medical office. I knew you could. You're going to be an amazing doctor, Owen Reed. Spring arrived again, bringing new life to the prairie. Hope took her first steps in April, wobbling between Charlotte and Owen's outstretched hands. They celebrated each milestone with the joy of parents who knew how precious and fragile life could be. The practice continued to expand. Word had spread about the woman doctor and her husband who'd stood up to corruption and now served the community with skill and dedication. Patients traveled from over 100 miles away for treatment. "We need to expand," Charlotte said one evening, reviewing their accounts. "We're turning people away because we don't have enough space." "I've been thinking about that." Owen pulled out a sketch he'd been working on. "What if we built a proper clinic, separate from the house, with multiple examination rooms, a surgery, even a few beds for patients who need overnight care?" Charlotte studied the drawing, excitement building. "It's perfect. But can we afford it? Between our savings and what the town council's willing to contribute, I think so." Owen's eyes shone with enthusiasm. "We could create something really special here, Charlotte. A real medical center for the territory." They broke ground in May. The whole town turned out to help. Marshall Brennan and the blacksmith framed walls. Mrs. Henderson and Mrs. Chen organized food for the workers. Even old Mr. Henderson, well into his 70s, insisted on hammering nails. "This is our clinic too," he told Charlotte. "You saved this town. Now we get to help save yours." By late summer, the clinic stood complete. 2 stories, whitewashed wood, with a sign that read Reed Medical Clinic in proud letters. Inside were 3 examination rooms, a proper surgery with the latest equipment, and 4 hospital beds for overnight patients. The grand opening brought the entire territory. People came from neighboring towns to see the new facility and celebrate the couple who'd made it possible. The territorial governor himself sent a letter of commendation, praising their dedication to frontier medicine. Charlotte stood with Owen and Hope on the clinic steps, looking out at the crowd. "We did this," she whispered. "Together." "Together," Owen agreed, his hand finding hers. "Always together." That evening, after the celebrations ended and Hope was asleep, Charlotte and Owen walked through the empty clinic. Their footsteps echoed in the new building. Everything smelled of fresh paint and possibility. "Your father would be proud," Owen said quietly. "You've taken what he started and built something incredible." Charlotte touched the wall, feeling the solid wood beneath her palm. "We built it. You and me and this whole community. That's what makes it special. It's not just mine. It belongs to everyone." Owen pulled her close, and they stood together in the moonlight streaming through the windows. Outside, the prairie stretched endlessly under the stars. Inside, they'd created a sanctuary, a place of healing and hope. "I love you," Charlotte said, the words coming easily now. "Thank you for staying, for building this life with me. Nowhere else I'd rather be." Owen kissed her softly. "This is home. Your home." They walked back to their house hand in hand, leaving the clinic gleaming in the moonlight. Tomorrow it would be full of patience and purpose. But tonight, it stood as a testament to what 2 people could build when they chose love over fear, partnership over solitude, hope over despair. As fall arrived and the leaves turned gold, Owen received news that made him go pale. A letter from his old Marshall friend. The family that had put a price on his head had finally given up the hunt. The bounty was lifted. Owen Reed was free to stop running, to put down roots, to live without looking over his shoulder. "It's over," he said, staring at the letter with disbelief. "I'm not wanted anymore." Charlotte wrapped her arms around him from behind. You were never wanted by them, but you've always been wanted here. By me, by Hope, by this community. Owen turned in her arms, and she saw tears on his cheeks. I can stay. Really stay. Not as a fugitive or a drifter, but as someone who belongs. You already belonged, Owen. The letter just makes it official. He held her tight, and Charlotte felt him shake with the release of years of tension and fear. When he pulled back, his smile was radiant. Let's make it really official then. I want to take the medical exams, get licensed properly, be Dr. Owen Reed, partner in the Reed Medical Clinic. I think that's a wonderful idea. Owen studied through the winter, preparing for the Territorial Medical Board exams. Charlotte quizzed him at night, while Hope played at their feet. The whole town seemed invested in his success, patients wishing him luck, Mrs. Henderson knitting him a good luck scarf. In March, Owen traveled to the territorial capital for the exams. Charlotte waited anxiously, keeping busy with patients and hope, but counting the days until his return. When he rode back into town a week later, she knew immediately from his face. He was grinning like a boy. I passed, he called out, dismounting and sweeping her into his arms. Charlotte! I passed! I'm a licensed doctor! The town celebrated again. It seemed like they were always celebrating these days, Charlotte thought. What a change from the fear and oppression of Judge Kincaid's era. Now they had reasons for joy, reasons to come together. The clinic flourished under their joint care. They made a formidable team, each bringing different strengths. Charlotte excelled at complex diagnoses and surgery. Owen had a gift for setting bones and a gentle manner with children that made even the most frightened patients relax. They worked long days side by side, then came home to Hope and the life they'd built. Some evenings they were too exhausted to do more than collapse by the fire. Other nights they stayed up talking about cases, debating treatments, dreaming about the future. I want to start a medical school, Charlotte said one night. Train more doctors for the frontier. There's so much need. We could do it. Owen agreed. Take on students. Teach them properly. Make sure the territory has skilled medical care everywhere. That's years away, though. We need to establish ourselves first. We have time. Owen pulled her close. We have our whole lives. Charlotte rested her head on his shoulder, feeling the steady beat of his heart. I like the sound of that. Our whole lives. Hope turned 2 in September. A bright, curious child who followed her parents around the clinic, pretending to doctor her dolls. She had Owen's gray-blue eyes and Charlotte's chestnut hair, and both parents were utterly besotted. She's going to be brilliant, Owen said, watching Hope carefully bandage her doll's arm with strips of cloth. She's going to be whatever she wants to be, Charlotte corrected. Doctor, teacher, rancher, anything. We'll make sure she has choices. Like her mother. Owen kissed Charlotte's temple. Strong, smart, independent. And like her father, Charlotte added. Kind, brave, dedicated. They stood together, watching their daughter play, knowing they'd given her the greatest gift possible. Not wealth or status, but love. Security. A home where she was cherished and encouraged to dream. As winter approached again, Charlotte realized with surprise that it had been nearly 3 years since that first blizzard. 3 years since Owen had ridden into her life and changed everything. The anniversary fell on a quiet Tuesday. They'd planned nothing special, too busy with patients. But that evening, after Hope was asleep, Owen took Charlotte's hand. "Come with me." He led her outside into the cold night. Snow was falling again, soft and gentle. In the distance, she could see their clinic, lights burning in a few windows where overnight patients rested. Closer, their home glowed with warmth. 3 years ago tonight, I found you stuck in a fence, Owen said, his breath misting in the cold air. "Most embarrassing moment of your life," you said. Charlotte laughed. "It definitely was. Best moment of mine." He turned her to face him, his hands warm on her shoulders despite the cold. "I was lost, Charlotte. Running from a past I couldn't escape, heading toward nothing. That blizzard saved my life, because it brought me to you." "Owen, let me finish." His eyes were intense, full of love. "You gave me everything. A home, a purpose, a family. You made me believe I deserved good things, that I could be more than my mistakes. Every day with you is a gift I never expected to receive." Charlotte felt tears sting her eyes. "You gave me just as much. You reminded me what partnership means, what real love looks like. You stood beside me when I needed it most and never asked for anything in return, except the chance to stay. I'm so grateful you let me stay. I'm so grateful you wanted to." They kissed in the falling snow, just as they had that first winter. But everything was different now. They weren't strangers anymore. They were partners, lovers, best friends, parents, doctors, everything to each other. When they pulled apart, Owen smiled. "Ready to go inside? It's freezing out here." "In a minute." Charlotte looked around at the town they'd helped save, the clinic they'd built, the home they'd made. "I just want to remember this moment. How perfect it is. Every moment with you is perfect." They stood together in the snow a little longer, holding each other close. Then they went inside to the warmth, to their daughter sleeping peacefully, to the life they'd built from broken pieces and desperate hope. The years that followed brought continued growth and happiness. The clinic's reputation spread across the territory and beyond. They treated everyone who came through their doors, regardless of ability to pay. Some patients brought chickens or vegetables instead of money. Charlotte and Owen accepted it all with gratitude. Hope grew into a bright, energetic child who loved following her parents on their rounds. By age 4, she could recite the names of common medicines and knew how to properly clean a wound. The town adored her, this child who represented their hope for the future. In the spring of Hope's 5th year, Charlotte discovered she was pregnant again. She told Owen over breakfast on a sunny April morning. "Another one?" His face lit up like sunrise. "Really?" "Really." Charlotte took his hand, placing it on her stomach. "Due in November." Owen came around the table and knelt beside her, just as he had with their first pregnancy. "I love you so much. Thank you for this, for everything. We're in this together, remember? Always together." Hope was thrilled at the prospect of a baby brother or sister. She helped Charlotte prepare the nursery, choosing blankets and arranging toys with serious concentration. The pregnancy was easier this time. Charlotte continued working almost until her due date, with Owen handling the heavier cases. The community rallied around them again, bringing food and offering help. Their son arrived on a cold November night, a week early and in a hurry. Owen delivered him while Charlotte gripped his hand and pushed. When the baby's first cry rang out, Charlotte laughed through her tears. "A boy," Owen said, his voice thick with emotion. "A healthy, perfect boy." They named him Thomas, after Charlotte's father. Tom Reed would carry on the medical tradition, they hoped, though they'd love him just as much if he chose a different path. Hope was instantly devoted to her baby brother. She sat beside Charlotte as she nursed, talking softly to Tom, promising to teach him everything she knew. "I'll show him how to bandage, and how to listen to hearts, and how to be gentle with patients who are scared," she announced seriously. Charlotte smiled, exchanging a look with Owen. Their family was complete, their practice thriving, their community strong. Everything they'd fought for and built together had come to fruition. Winter settled in, but the Reed household was warm and full of life. Charlotte and Owen took turns with night feedings, walking the floor with Tom when he was fussy, stealing quiet moments together when both children slept. "Remember when it was just us?" Owen asked one evening, both of them exhausted but content. "Seems like a lifetime ago." "A different life," Charlotte agreed. "A lonelier one. I wouldn't change anything. Not a single moment. Not even the fence?" Owen laughed, the sound warm and familiar. "Especially not the fence. That fence brought us together. Remind me to thank the railroad company. Pretty sure they went bankrupt after the Kincaid scandal." "Good." Charlotte snuggled closer, careful not to wake Tom sleeping in Owen's arms. They deserved it. They sat together by the fire, their children safe and sleeping, their home solid around them. Outside, snow fell quietly. Inside, love kept them warm. As Tom grew from infant to toddler, the Reed family settled into a comfortable rhythm. Mornings began early with breakfast together, the whole family around the table. Then Charlotte and Owen would head to the clinic, while Mrs. Chen watched the children. Some days the kids came along, playing quietly in the clinic's waiting room while their parents worked. The practice continued to expand. They took on their first medical student, a young man from Montana who'd heard about their work and traveled hundreds of miles to learn from them. Then another student came, and another. Before long, they were running an informal medical school alongside the clinic. "You were right," Owen told Charlotte one evening as they reviewed student progress. "This is important. Training the next generation of frontier doctors. We're building something that will outlast us," Charlotte agreed. "Something that will serve the territory for decades. Legacy." Owen looked thoughtful. "Our children will grow up seeing medicine as service, as healing and helping. That's a good legacy." Charlotte reached across the desk to take his hand. "The best legacy is showing them what real love looks like. What partnership means. How to build something together. We've done that." Owen squeezed her hand. "Haven't we?" "We have." Years passed in the way of happy lives. Seasons turned. Children grew. The clinic thrived. Hope showed real talent for medicine, often assisting her parents with simple cases by age 8. Tom was quieter, but showed signs of his father's gentle way with frightened patience. Charlotte and Owen grew older together, their bond deepening with each passing year. They still worked side by side every day, still came home to family dinners and evenings by the fire, still looked at each other with the same love, and wonder they'd felt that first winter. One evening in late autumn, as golden leaves swirled past the windows, Charlotte stood in the clinic after all the patients had gone. She was almost 30 now. Owen, 35. They'd built a life that exceeded every dream she dared to have. Owen came up behind her, slipping his arms around her waist in the familiar gesture. "What are you thinking about? How much has changed? How much we've built?" Charlotte leaned back against him. "Do you ever miss it? The drifting? The freedom?" "Not for a second." His lips brushed her temple. "This is freedom, Charlotte. Being where I choose to be, with who I choose. Doing work that matters. This is everything. No regrets? Only that I didn't find you sooner." Charlotte turned in his arms to face him. Gray touched his temples now, and fine lines crinkled around his eyes when he smiled. He was more handsome than ever, she thought. The weathering of time and love and hard work had only added character. "I love you," she said. "More now than the day we married. More every day. I love you too." Owen kissed her softly. "Thank you for letting a drifter stay. For seeing something in me worth keeping. Thank you for choosing to stay. For building this life with me." They stood together in the quiet clinic. Two people who'd found each other against impossible odds and built something beautiful. Outside, the sun set in brilliant gold and orange. Inside, love kept them warm. The sound of children's laughter drifted from their house next door, Hope calling for them, Tom giggling at something. Their family, their home, their life. "We should go," Charlotte said reluctantly. "Children need dinner." "In a minute." Owen held her close. "Let me just hold you a little longer." So they stood together as the light faded, grateful for every moment, every choice, every turn that had brought them here. Two broken people who'd found each other in a blizzard and built a life full of warmth and love and purpose. "Ready?" Owen finally asked. "Ready." Charlotte took his hand. "Let's go home." They walked together through the golden evening, toward their house where lights burned warm and welcoming, toward their children and the dinner waiting, toward the life they'd chosen, the love they'd built, the future they were creating together. Behind them, the clinic stood solid and strong, a testament to their work. Ahead, their home glowed with life and laughter. And between the two, Charlotte and Owen Reed walked hand in hand, exactly where they belonged. Together. Always together.